So once upon a time, Mega Man 10 was released in the year 2010, and that was, for all intents and purposes, the last time there was a major Mega Man title of any real significance for the past 8 years. And during that time, Mega Man was in a somewhat hibernation state, only getting occasional re-releases of legacy titles, with new games getting cancelled, token cameo appearances that largely meant nothing with one or two exceptions along the way, and, well, Fat Mega Man was a thing for some reason. However, good things do come to those who wait, and in 2018, Capcom not only made the bold decision in putting out a brand spanking new 11th entry in the classic Mega Man series, but they even took the bold step of actually releasing it. Truly a groundbreaking moment in Mega Man history, and the only significant event worth anyone's attention for the past 8 years of nothing that came before. And make no mistake, Mega Man 11 is indeed a new game. It is not an 8-bit retro throwback that the common fan with programming knowledge can put together, nor is it a cheap mobile phone game that would be forgotten within a couple of months due to how horrible it was. What we have here is a brand new Mega Man title with spiffy new graphics, spiffy new widescreen, spiffy new gimmick, and some other stuff that is spiffy and new. And yet, as new as this game is, it also feels familiar. And it just feels right. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Mega Man 11, for being the first new entry in a good long while, decides to play it safe and stick with the traditional formula. 8 robot masters for you to tackle in any order you wish, along with 4 more Wily levels awaiting you once those initial 8 have been defeated. 12 levels may not sound like much, and the levels themselves are fairly straightforward in one way. These levels are long, at times feeling like endless marathons. But if that doesn't do it for you, there are extra challenge modes that you could play, comprising different types of challenges, but we won't dwell too much into that for now. As per usual, you control Mega Man, who is back to full power after being nerfed in the previous 2 titles, which means he has his charge shot and slide available from the start, and yes, Mega Man's shots pass through solid objects. Hey, people can bitch about Mega Man dropping like a fly when he goes through a door, but when it comes to the truly important, functional stuff, I want my shots to pass through solid objects, and Mega Man 11 gives me that. Seriously, the fucking asshole who decided to remove that bit for X number of games needed to get his ass fired a long time ago. But I digress. So the big selling point of Mega Man 11 is the newly implemented double gear system, represented by these gears on the bottom of your life and weapon meters. By pressing either the left or right bumper buttons on your shoulders, you can either enable the speed gear, which slows down time, allowing for more precise movement, or you can enable the power gear, which doubles the shots of your standard buster, as well as power up your master weapons, a sort of precursor to the Mega Man X ARM upgrades. Both these gears can be used at any time and as many times as desired, though only for short bursts of time, as the mechanic is prone to short-circuiting, disabling the feature if the meter gets too full. Additionally, when Mega Man is low on health, he can enable a double gear maneuver which activates both gears at once. It cannot be turned off on a whim and leaves Mega Man severely vulnerable for a short period of time. So suffice it to say, use this as a last resort, or just don't use it at all. It's entirely up to you. The double gear system is a crutch to assist in those tricky parts if needed and if used wisely, but that's all it really is. One could play through the entirety of Mega Man 11 without ever using the system. Truth be told, I tend to ignore the system on my first playthrough of some of these levels and only apply to laser revisits or the various challenge modes. Once I got the weapons, the power gear becomes a useful tool in powering up these weapons and have them do some real damage, but setting aside double gear, you also have other tools via the shop to aid you. Energy tanks, weapon tanks, mystery tanks, energy balancers, and other bits, even enhancement parts like auto chargers, wider shots, and boots allowing for better traction, are available for purchase with the bolts you collect on your journey. Though at first most of the items are locked away and only become available after clearing certain conditions. Mega Man 11 sports 4 levels of difficulty: Newcomer, Casual, Normal, and Superhero, and they are exactly as advertised. Normal is your standard Mega Man level of difficulty, so old-timers can jump in and play it like usual, with Casual being slightly easier and Superhero being somewhat tougher. Newcomer makes things easier in a number of ways. Your shots do more damage, much like in Mega Man 2's normal mode, and traps are no longer the traditional insta-kill death traps. Oh, and you also have infinite lives, so no worries, Mega Man 11 has all skill levels covered to the point where anyone can pick up and play this one. And make no mistake, this is classic Mega Man at the end of the day. While there are some new bits for you to contend with and some bits to help in a bind, this is a revival of a formula that hasn't deviated much from what came before. Levels are straightforward in their design, not quite deviating from the standard linear fare. However, the length of levels are perhaps the newest hurdle. Mega Man 11 levels are long, almost marathon affairs in nature with no break in between, and the difficulty chosen determines how many checkpoints you have to save your neck. I suppose personally I'm not too bothered by this since I've been playing loads of Mega Man Maker lately, and I've been subjected to numerous levels that fans created that took forever to conquer due to their overwhelming length. Those not privy to that sort of experience might not have that kind of fortitude and might wonder, when does this ever end, as they go through what seems like the 5th torch segment. Boss battles are a bit more of a challenge due to the multiple phases you have to endure. A boss battle starts off easy enough, but then kicks into gear and changes the dynamic a bit once you've inflicted enough damage. Even so, once you've figured out the weakness weapon and combine it with power gear, they tend to not last long, with the exception of the wily bosses and even Blockman, who has a secondary form for you to defeat. And when it comes to the arsenal of Mega Man 11, I'd be lying if I said they ranked among the series' best, but they're useful enough for the situations that the game presents. Brick Dropper is a neat aerial attack if used properly, Pile Driver could easily double as an air dash, and Chain Blast with the power gear enabled can be a dangerously explosive weapon, no pun intended. Rush Coil now summons at the press of a button, which is a nice touch, as does Rush Jet when you get it after clearing half the Robot Masters, though both are now tied to the same meter, something to be mindful of and a bit of a caveat overall. The main game isn't enough for you, there's a number of challenge modes you could try out, ranging from time attacks to score attacks to other variations such as balloon popping and things of that nature. Beating the game unlocks Dr. Light's Trials, a series of 30 rooms that take inspiration from the challenge modes of the various Mega Man Legacy collections. So the game gives you plenty to do once the main course is completed. Control is top-notch classic Mega Man. It's tight, it's responsive, it makes use of every single gimmick on your modern day controller, the right analog stick even serves as a quick shortcut to various weapons you've earned, and perhaps most importantly, it just feels right. My biggest concern when it came to the graphical switchover was not how the game would look, but rather how the controls would be affected. Mega Man 7 and 8 felt a bit off in their control scheme. They still worked, but didn't quite feel the same. This was something that Mega Man 11 nailed beautifully. Mega Man moves about as well as he did on the 8-bit format and responds just as well. The jumps felt right, the slide was solid, the walking was the right speed. It just works perfectly without a hitch. That makes me rather pleased. Mega Man 11 abandons the pixel-based art style of its 8, 16, 32-bit predecessors and adopts a clean-looking 3D visuals 2D gameplay format, and it looks alright for the most part. Mega Man 11 keeps things small rather than try to inflate everything to giant size, which means more real estate for you to play around with as far as level design is concerned. Even so, everything looks fairly polished and the art style has a nice clean look to it. The animation's pretty solid. Performance, at least on my end, was fairly smooth. There wasn't any instances of slowdown or anything too glitchy or anything like that. And the cutscenes are fairly basic bits where characters have moving mouths when they talk, because of course they do. It makes sense. What dumbass would make a game with talking characters and not have their mouths move?
It's a long shot, but it's our only hope. The fate of the entire country hangs in the balance.
Oh yeah, that.
So she can provide
Sound-wise, Mega Man 11 is a bit of a mixed bag, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Sound effects are what they are, serviceable, functional, no hiccups as far as I could tell. The voice acting is pretty solid, with the characters having some personality, and are actually pleasant to the ears. There's even an option for the Japanese voice bites if you prefer, which sound like any Japanese voiceovers I've heard. Not much else to say there. When it comes to the music, I have to admit at first I wasn't too fond of the soundtrack beyond maybe a handful of tracks. Blockman, Fuse Man, Bounce Man, Gear Fortress, and even Tundra Man were probably the standouts for me. Eventually, the rest of the soundtrack did grow on me, and for the most part, it's a solid collection of tunes. Not too terrible or anything like that, it's a mostly mileage varying thing you see. For those who pre-ordered the game, they got what the game dubbed instrumental remixes of the 8 Robot Master themes. All I'll say in this regard is that Blockman was the only one that stood out from the bunch, and I didn't really care for the rest. Again, your mileage may vary, and it's unfortunate that this is a pre-order exclusive because, well, I tried looking up the DLC, it wasn't there, and that kinda sucks, regardless, so, eh. Overall, Mega Man 11 is a return to form. I don't know if I'd go so far to call it a glorious return to form, but it is nonetheless a promising start if Capcom wanted to do more Mega Man games, whether it be along the classic lines or elsewhere spanning X number of games. Mega Man 11 plays it relatively safe by sticking with the basic formula that works best while introducing a couple new bits to make a truly unique experience, not to mention just a really fun, well-made game to boot. It's more of the same, except not really more of the same. It's something slightly different, but not quite. It's Mega Man 11, it's new Mega Man, and it's a solid job indeed.